Kodo masana che anala sado nalaski. Amado aja tiskanto jakan as chiniaja no slini. She ya Niagara Rock Virgin she kia ani nashle. Ashkazo bashin na kadina edash che to hanedashnele. She na kidabilto ba anatin sa ihahagido na kidamilto ba anatin na ki hahagi. The nebach a ken nashle. The talana telaka aha will yet the ontishike to be kipa hodzen a ade on a shato ad a shnelake the hatin. Shmadosh je a depatogiri rock virgin ya. Cut out a can't nashle. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, evening. It is an honor to be here with you today. And today we have the Youth Q&A live discussion. And with us today are a number of distinguished guests, leaders, and specialists within their own right. And so with that, I'll go ahead and give the floor over to the Honorable Vice President of the Navajo Nation, Myron Lizer.
Oh, yeah, Navajo Vice President Liza here, Comanche Nishlet, Hana Buses team, Comanche Deshaje, Class It's good to be with you all here on this live Facebook opportunity to talk about vaccines and hesitancy and all that. So I want to thank you for joining this Facebook live panel and discussion. Our youth is a key factor in carrying out our culture, our traditions, and our language, and even in this fight against this virus and this pandemic. So thank you, Ms. Navajo. Yeah.
Thank you, Vice President Lizer, your support and continuous efforts in advocating for vaccines and also the continued health and COVID-19 guidelines for our Navajo people is deeply appreciated. You and also President Jonathan Ness. So with that, we also, like I said before, have a number of special guests with us today. And we also have doctors as well. So with that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Hammond.
Thank you. Shea Laura Hammett, Yanashish. I'm I'm with the Johns Hopkins Center for American Indian Health. I'm a pediatrician and infectious disease doctor and epidemiologist. And I'm very honored to be here today to talk with everybody about vaccines. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hammett. Your presence here is deeply appreciated. And with that, we also have Dr. Price, if she is on the line. Since she is not on the line, maybe she'll join us a little later on. We'll go ahead and move on to NDOH Health Educator, HCOC Case Management, Lena.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Linnea Desberger-Jim. I'm a health educator with the Navajo Health Education Program. I'm currently assisting the Health Command and Operations Center of Case Management, Home Support, and then the Public Health Messaging. So it's good to be here today. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. So since Dr. Price will not be with us today, we do have another individual who will be joining us today. I believe her name is Deanna Vigil.
Hello, Umbiakini no kawan Diana Vigil Novito kawan Ove Goyo Nanom Bewingyata. Hello everyone, my name is Diana Vigil, or D for short. I am a research program coordinator with the Johns Hopkins Center for American Indian Health, and I'm calling today from the Pueblo. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you to all of those who are watching and all of those who are participating today in the Youth Q&A Forum. And it's very important that we continue to stay vigilant with COVID-19 on the rise here again on the nation and the Delta variant. So today we have come together to provide you information on hesitancy for getting vaccinated and also any more additional information that can be provided. As youth, oftentimes we are the key to our own success. And so I feel like that is definitely the case here with this COVID-19 pandemic, and we can and definitely will take charge with this, take charge of this virus and make sure that our family and our friends are safe. And it all starts with us. So with that being said, I'd like to go ahead and move on to our next presentation, who will be talking about vaccine hesitancy. Deanna Vigil, who will provide us with a much needed information on this topic. And I hope you all learned something today and learned something from Ms. Vigil here.
Great. Hello, everyone. Is it possible for me to share my screen? All right. Okay, I will go ahead and do this without slides. So sorry, everyone watching, but we'll go ahead and get started. And I want to just, oh, thank you, Eli. Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay, well, I'll go ahead and get started, and if I can share screen, then I'll show you some visuals as well. But I want to get started talking about what vaccine hesitancy actually is. And it exists on a spectrum. So we have people on one end who are really against vaccines. We have people on the other end who are really pro-vaccine. Then we have people kind of right here who are unwilling, but might be willing with the right information. And then we have people who are like, they're not super pro-vaccine, but they're willing to get the vaccine. Then we have people in the middle who just really aren't either which way. They have questions. They're not completely against, they're not completely for. And so these people in this section is who I'm going to talk about, and is who we're referring to when we talk about vaccine hesitancy. And as I mentioned, people can change their where they stand on this spectrum based on what information is available to them, the data that's out and available, and then also just their own personal experiences. So the Institute of Urban Indian Health, or the Urban Institute of Indian Health, they did a survey not too long ago, and they just wanted to understand what our perceptions of vaccine, of COVID vaccine in Native communities. And of the people who got vaccinated, 75% were willing to receive the COVID vaccine, 25% were unwilling. But of the 25% who were unwilling, again, that's not complete rejection, that's just, they're just unwilling right now. So of that 25%, several of them thought that the vaccines moved through trials too quickly. They thought that COVID vaccines were dangerous, or that the vaccines were inadequately tested for safety and effectiveness. And then there was a fear of potential side effects. Interestingly, though, of the people, of everyone who took the survey, both those willing and unwilling to get the vaccine, 90% found that COVID was a serious risk, 75% thought they were at risk for infection, and 64% said they would receive the vaccine at some point in the future. And so, sorry, that was for unwilling, but both willing and unwilling share similar concerns about side effects and safety, as well as testing concerns. So it's really normal to question a vaccine and to have some concerns about it right now. Okay, and it looks like I should be, I'm still not able to share slides. But so it's really normal to have those type of concerns, and I think that we shouldn't discourage people from asking questions and looking at the data and different reports. And so we can communicate about the vaccine and be really transparent about the process in order to help build confidence and kind of put to rest some of the concerns that people might be having. We can't talk about vaccine hesitancy without acknowledging sources of distrust. And so some of the sources of distrust that are alive in many Native communities and also other communities that have been marginalized are colonization and historical trauma. If we look back on the history of infectious diseases and vaccine history, that's definitely a source of distrust. There are also past unethical research with Native nations, and then the ongoing systemic racism and disparities that we see today, right? And so our goal is to build confidence around COVID vaccines in order to protect our communities, our culture, our children, our future. So it's so important that we acknowledge these current systems and different sources of distrust that have led us here today. On top of those more specific things that are specific to us and other communities, this is all made worse by in times of crisis. So we are in a time of crisis, we're in a pandemic, and also when there is a lot of scientific uncertainty. And so that also exists right now. This is a novel coronavirus. It's a new virus. We're still learning about it. We're, almost 2 years into the pandemic, and we've learned so much, but we went through a time where we really didn't know a lot, and we just had to kind of shift as we learned more information. This problem is also made worse when politicians, rather than experts, become the public face of crisis management, which we definitely saw during the pandemic. And then also by how quickly the vaccines were developed and approved, and just a general misunderstanding of warp speed, or maybe some people have heard Operation Warp Speed, or they just thought that the vaccine was created too fast. And so all of these things combined create a situation where you're going to have a lot of people who are hesitant about getting a vaccine. But there are some things that have happened or that have taken place to help mitigate some of these, or to help increase trust and transparency in this process. So some of those things are changes to improving research ethics. And so we have institutional review boards, and for people who are not familiar, maybe you heard them call IRBs, but they are bodies of people. It's like a committee, if you will, of people with different expertise who govern research related to human individuals. And so any research that involves human participants is overseen by some kind of regulatory board to make sure that first of all, that the research is done in a good way, that it's safe and continues to be safe throughout the study, and any other kind of ethical things that come up. And so many tribes have their own IRB or their own version of this board. And in the Navajo Nation, we have the Navajo Nation Human Research Review Board. Other tribes have their own, or we also have Indian Health Services as well to help with that, and some area IRBs as well. And so there are plenty of people overseeing this research and making sure that it's done in a good way. But then on top of that, we also have informed consent process. So anybody who is involved in research or volunteers to be a participant in research really has to undergo can be lengthy process called the consent process, which goes over all of the risks and the benefits of the study, the purpose of the study, what happens if you have samples taken, what happens to those, all of those types of things. And so research is voluntary, and in order to participate in research, you need to understand what those risks and benefits are. Another thing that has contributed to maybe better research, specifically with this vaccine, is that there are more natives in research in general, but specifically on the Navajo Nation. So not only did we have the Navajo Nation Human Research Review Board looking over, a vaccine, COVID-19 vaccine clinical trial, but we also had Native researchers on that team, as well as Native participants. And it's so important to have all three of those levels represented, because that really leads to better research for the entire community and the population as a whole. Natives have contributed to the introduction of many life-saving drugs and vaccines outside of COVID. All right, so now I want to just touch on the research behind it. So earlier I mentioned that there was a misunderstanding of how fast the vaccine was created. So traditionally, there are 3 stages of a clinical trial, and they happen after each other. So the purpose of each phase is different. Phase 1 is really looking to test safety of the product and if the body can tolerate it. So when we figure out that it's safe and the body can handle it, then we move to the next phase where we want to know, does this vaccine work? Does it mount an immune response or not? And when we figure out that it does, then we move on to phase 3, and then we want to look at, okay, it's safe, our bodies can tolerate it, it does help to fight germs, so how does it actually disease or infection or severe disease? And so that process can take a long time because we have to wait for people to get naturally infected with disease in order to figure out if the vaccine prevents it or lessens the severity or not. But with COVID, all 3 of those phases still happened, but they were just overlapped. And so phase 1 overlapped phase 2, overlapped phase 3. And we were really able to do this for 2 main reasons. The first one, if anyone has ever worked in research before, you know that a big part of what takes a long time is the administrative stuff, the paperwork, the data collection, data analysis, safety, data monitoring, things like that. But when you have so much resources and people put towards the development of a vaccine, you have people looking at things in real time. You have, you're well staffed. You're able to kind of move through that administrative part much quicker. The other part of this, that second reason, is that there was so much and still is so much COVID infection that it didn't take a long time for people to naturally become infected with COVID in order to get enough people infected to figure out if this vaccine works or not. And so both of those things allowed the vaccine to be developed and approved in the time frame that it was. I also want to mention that the type of vaccine that we're working with had already been being studied for a long time, and coronaviruses have been around for a long time and being studied. This is just a new coronavirus, right? A new type of coronavirus. So we weren't completely starting from scratch either, and that also made a huge difference. And so I talked a little bit about the vaccine that we have been studying this. So how does it actually work? The vaccine uses a small piece of the virus, and then that gives our body the instructions. So we get the vaccine, right? And then our body now has the instructions to create this piece of the virus that our own body's like defense mechanism can recognize to develop antibodies or germ fighters, if you will, to fight the virus should we be exposed to it, right? And so it's supposed to fight it off so that way we don't become infected, or if we do become infected, it's not as severe because we already had some germ fighters on scene doing their work, right? So that that is how the COVID vaccines work. And all vaccines work very similarly. They just tell our body what to do in order to fight the real thing, should we be exposed to it. And they can't cause infection. So because we are only using pieces of a virus, we can think about this as a vehicle, right? And so we have a tire or a steering wheel or a speedometer. Those are all pieces of a vehicle, but if you only have those pieces together, they don't make a whole vehicle, right? And it's similar with these vaccines. They're just pieces of viruses. They don't make a whole virus, and therefore cannot cause infection. one vaccine specifically that has had a positive impact on the Navajo Nation, specifically amongst children, is a Prevnar vaccine, which maybe some of you have had, which is just a vaccine against invasive pneumococcal disease, or which causes pneumonia. And so I myself have had pneumonia when I was a small child before I could be vaccinated. And I wish that I was able to be vaccinated, though I didn't have control over that when I was 1. So anyways, let's see if I can, okay. So prior to Prevnar in 2001, rates of invasive pneumococcal disease were really high on the Navajo Nation. And then we had the introduction of Prevnar 7, which is the vaccine to vaccinate against this disease. And we saw rates drop pretty dramatically, but then they started to increase a little bit. So then we introduced a different vaccine, Prevnar 13. And when we introduced Prevnar 13, in about 2009, 2010, we saw rates drop dramatically and they stayed low. So Prevnar is an example of a vaccine that has virtually eliminated PCV type disease, or like pneumonia due to invasive pneumococcal disease in children. So that's really exciting. And she gives us an example of what maybe COVID could look like when we're able to vaccinate a lot of individuals, and individuals take the vaccine. So I just want to end with a quote from a study by the Urban Indian Health Institute that said that the primary motivation for participants who indicated willingness to get vaccinated was a strong sense of responsibility to protect the Native community and preserve cultural ways. And so I'll just go ahead and leave us with that. But I think it's so important. Vaccinating can be a really individual choice, but it doesn't only affect us, right? My choice to get vaccinated affects my family, my friends, people I work with, my community as a whole, everything else. And so I'll stop there and take questions. Thank you.
Yeah, Ms. Deanna, for your information regarding vaccine hesitancy. And I'm sure here pretty soon that we will have the information and questions that were being asked by our people out there. And so just to recap to our people out here who are watching all across the nation and off the nation, you know, what Deanna had previously discussed it about vaccine hesitancy is not only here on the nation, but widespread, just as she mentioned. And I know some people are hesitant, but it's also important to be informative. And that is exactly what she did. She educated us about why there is such hesitancy regarding the vaccinations. And it's important to know where it came from and how it came to be. And I can understand that, which is why I felt it was important. And so did the Navajo Health Command Center, the Navajo Department of Health, and then also OPVP, Office of the President and Vice President, felt it was important to bring you this Navajo Youth Q&A session today. And so I'm sure once we figure out what the technical side of things, how we can answer those questions for you, we will go back to those. But a little bit in Navajo, she'e ya sha otse. Le yasin esienta e bigit gonna she'e sha otse. Ako bini na niki yaha kont aida niki na antikin bi dohodlo sa has twi sani adanile big echo olte da isonof akot ao yaha has twi sani bizad that dit atle ako na antikin big echo sha otse de inde da yan le Washington de hanetla niki akota Hanna and Linigi Nihij Kodela. Ako Benachin Shay Sha Otse. Ako Yaha Benina Ad Ashande She Shazani Nothini Kwa the COVID-19 vaccine. Digi She Moderna Edo Dago Pfizer Gi Ashande Chik Shazani Nothini. Please get your vaccine. This is what we are encouraging today so that you can be educated if you have not been vaccinated already. And so with that, we will go ahead and move forward to our next presentation, which will be done by Dr. Healt on misinformation and disinformation on the vaccines. So Dr. Healt, I will go ahead and give the floor over to you.
Thank you so much. I know Eli is going to try to enable screen sharing or to project some slides, but I want to go ahead and just get started. Thank you very much for the remarks from Ms. Navajo Nation and from D.V. Hill. I think this is important background to provide to help us understand that it is like perfectly okay and natural to have questions about the vaccine. And I think that's the first message that I want to get out to people is that that's a normal thing. And that's actually a good thing. It shows that you're thinking about it and you're wanting to make informed decisions. And I think that's where we want the focus of the next part of the discussion to go is thinking about the information that we are receiving. We're inundated with information from so many different sources right now. And unfortunately, what we've seen with this pandemic is that there is a lot of misinformation and disinformation that's being circulated. Misinformation really refers to incorrect information that may be spread by people who believe that the information they're sharing is correct, but it's incorrect information. Disinformation is a different concept, and that's really information that, or misinformation that's disseminated with the intention of misleading others. And we've heard about that on some of these social media platforms that, you know, people are conveying disinformation in a way that's intentionally designed to mislead others. And an example of that from our current pandemic setting is that, you know, if a political leader claims that COVID-19 is no worse than the flu, for example, despite knowing otherwise, that is disinformation. That's information that that person knows is incorrect. And then, you know, they're intentionally putting it out there to mislead others. If someone else hears that and believes it and shares it, then they're spreading misinformation. All of these things, you know, together are dangerous and can cause cause confusion, and it can cause people to take risks that can harm health. And I think one of the things that we've all probably seen in our own lives and our own social media interactions, and that has actually been proven in many studies now at this point, is that false news travels much faster than truthful news. So when you have those sort of stories that catch your attention and that seem so, you know, incredible, oftentimes because they are not credible. It's not real information, but those stories tend to travel much, much faster. As the head of the WHO said earlier this year, misinformation spreads faster and more easily than the virus, and it's just as dangerous. And so I want to help encourage people to consider the accuracy of their content when deciding what to share and what to sort of take on board as their own, you know, truths that they're believing and endorsing. right now during this pandemic, we also have what's been termed an infodemic, meaning too much information. And we're having to decide constantly about, the information that's coming at us. Is this fact or is this fake? And unfortunately, in a digital environment, this information can spread very quickly, causing confusion and making people unfortunately make poor decisions. And so with that context, I wanted to next really take on some of the common misinformation that we hear right now. And I don't know, Eli, if you're able to project the slides and can start from slide 6, we can start from there, or else I can just continue. And you can go into presenter view. Yeah, not presenter view, but let's see. Thank you. I think it's coming up maybe. I can't tell what others can see on that, but if it's the first one that we wanted to talk about was that COVID-19 vaccines can cause fertility problems. And I think that, this may not be on the minds of some of the youth, or at least we hope that it's not on the minds of our youngest children, but it is on the mind of parents, particularly parents of teenage girls. The fact is that COVID-19 does not affect fertility. The first evidence that we had to show that was that in the clinical trials, when we were studying COVID-19 vaccines, participants were instructed not to get pregnant. And we actually, went through steps to make sure that people were using appropriate contraception, because we didn't know at that time, what the effects of the vaccine could be. And so in the earliest, clinical trials, we asked people not to get pregnant. Despite this guidance, 37 women who got 2 doses of the Pfizer vaccine got pregnant, and there was a similar number of people in the placebo group who got pregnant. So there were no differences in the pregnancy in the clinical trials between those who got the saline shot and those who got 2 doses of the Pfizer vaccine. We also saw from those early studies in those women who got pregnant that there were no cases of stillbirth or major birth defects in any of the babies born to the women in the trial. Some concerns from men as well, wanting to make sure that they'll still be able to have children after they get a COVID-19 vaccine. And we can provide really confident reassurance that there's no evidence that getting a vaccine impacts reproductive health. What we do know, however, is that getting infected with the COVID-19 virus can cause reproductive health problems. And so it is important to protect yourself against the virus for that reason as well. We've also had people ask, is it safe to get the vaccine? Not just thinking about future fertility, but is it actually safe to get the vaccine if I'm pregnant or breastfeeding? And the answer to that is absolutely yes, that it is recommended for pregnant people to get vaccinated. And this is based on now studies of hundreds of thousands of women showing that there's no increased risk of miscarriage after vaccination. The vaccine is safe for pregnant women. COVID, however, is not safe for pregnant women. Right now, 97% of the pregnant women who've been hospitalized with a case of COVID are unvaccinated women. So along with the risks of severe illness in a pregnant woman or a recently pregnant woman, having the virus also puts babies at increased risk of preterm birth and admission to the ICU. So it's really important not only to protect yourself as a pregnant woman, but that can also pass the protection to the baby and help keep the baby protected as well. One of the other bits of misinformation that we hear is that it's not safe for young children to get this vaccine. The fact, however, is that the FDA and the CDC have really carefully reviewed all of the clinical trial data from Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine, and it has been shown to be safe and effective for children 12 and older. That doesn't mean they're not going to have side effects. Just like we had side effects when we got those vaccines, just like they may have a side effect if they get, their routine childhood immunizations, they can experience mild side effects, the same types of things that we have: soreness in the arm, feeling tired, having a headache or a fever. These things, are generally clear up in 1 to 2 days. And I think the real bottom line here is that the known risks of COVID-19 illness and its potential complications, long COVID, hospitalization, those risks of getting the virus far, far outweigh the potential risks of having a very rare adverse reaction to vaccination. Some people have also, said, well, gosh, young people don't get very sick from COVID, so they don't really need to be vaccinated. And while it's true that most children have mild symptoms or no symptoms, children can become severely ill with COVID-19. And as a pediatrician and as, someone, my colleagues, around the country, it's the saddest thing, to have, a child in the hospital who's sick and who potentially doesn't survive an illness for something that's vaccine preventable. And so while, like I said, most cases are mild, that's not always the case. And right now in the United States, the hospitalization rate for people who are 0 to 17 years of age is actually the highest that it's been for the whole pandemic. Unfortunately, kids with underlying conditions such as obesity or diabetes or asthma are at increased risk of more severe outcomes. And what we've heard, all throughout this pandemic about the disparities that are seen in American Indian, Alaska Native populations, and we see the same thing in youth. Unfortunately, the hospitalization rate for Native youth up to 17 years is 3 times higher than for white youth. And for Native folks who are 18 to 49 years of age, the risk is 5 times higher than for whites. So it is important to provide that protection from the vaccination to prevent not only the acute infection, but also the potential long-term effects of COVID, which unfortunately many people, are continuing to suffer from months after they've supposedly, recovered from the virus. So the bottom line here is that children can get sick from COVID-19, they can spread it to others, and that the best protection is choosing to be vaccinated when you can, and also continuing to wear a mask and take all of the other steps that we know will help slow the spread of the virus. Another bit of misinformation that we hear sometimes is, somebody that has had COVID or a family member's had COVID, so they decide that they don't need a vaccine because they've had that infection already. But the truth of the matter is that getting vaccinated is the best protection, even if somebody already had COVID. And the reason for that is that COVID does offer some natural protection or immunity, but the duration of that is not clear. And there was actually a recent study that just came out that showed that unvaccinated people who'd already had COVID are more than twice as likely to get COVID-19 again, to get reinfected compared to fully vaccinated people. So that vaccine does give you additional protection, and especially in people who've actually had COVID and then get vaccinated, they get very high levels of antibodies that are, very protective and can prevent disease. And so even for vaccinated people, or even for people who've had COVID-19, vaccination is recommended. One thing that we've also heard recently is, this thought that vaccine coverage is really high here. So I have herd protection. I don't need to get the vaccine. The fact of the matter that herd immunity really quite requires the whole herd, and we're a long way from that. We don't have herd immunity, and infections are continuing to occur. And I think, because of the variants that are circulating, and because we don't yet have the whole herd, we don't have that high level of coverage, we are continuing to see circulation. So on Navajo Nation, I think somewhere between 2/3 and 3/4 of people 12 and older are vaccinated, so that's good, but there's still a lot of people who are unvaccinated, and that's what allows the virus to continue to circulate. In fact, the lowest vaccine coverage on Navajo Nation is actually among the 20 to 44-year-old age group. And I can tell you that, some of those cases that we do see, when folks have brought it home to their elders, it's something that, people really, feel a sense of sadness about. But there is, a good way to prevent that from happening, which is through vaccination. And that not only protects the individuals, but also protects their elders and the community. So as you're sort of trying to figure out where to source information, I think one of the most important takeaways from this is hopefully to source that information from reliable sources. If you see something online, be a detective, do a little investigation before sharing anything on social media. Just do a quick Google search or cross-check it against a trusted source. There are a number of trusted sources that I've listed on the right there. Starting first and foremost with your healthcare provider, but also the CDC, the Navajo Department of Health, the National Indian Health Board, as well as other resources like the Johns Hopkins Center for American Indian Health, which has a large library of resources. And I think just, follow your gut on this. If a story sounds fake, don't click on it or engage with it, because if you do, that leads search algorithms to promote it even more and contributes to continued misinformation. So with that, I'll wrap up and say thank you, and appreciate everybody being here to have this conversation about vaccines and what we can do to protect our communities as best as possible.
Thank you, Dr. Hammett, for your information regarding misinformation and disinformation about the vaccine. I think it's very important that you came here to provide us with your presentation, because a lot of people have that misinformation and disinformation, and that is often disseminated through the entirety of the people, especially when it gets wind within social media platforms. And so it is important to always address and understand and have the right individuals give you the source of information, such as Dr. Hammett. And these are individuals that we brought to you today who have real in-depth knowledge of COVID-19 vaccines, who are part of the research, and who also understand what the vaccine is consisted of. And so with that being said, I'm sure there are also questions out there that you all have about the vaccine, and maybe about the presentation that Dr. Hammett had provided to us today, and maybe even Deanna when she provided her presentation. And then we'll go ahead and get to those at a later time within this event that we're having today in the live discussion. And so with that being said, I would also again like to thank Dr. Laura Hammond for coming to us today with her information, and we deeply appreciate all that she has to offer and continuously helping our people in this way. And so with that being said, we'll go ahead and move on forward to our next presenter. And while our presenters are presenting what they're going to be giving us knowledge and things of that matter, it's important to always have questions in the back of your mind. You know, what is that one question that has been just in the back of your mind that you feel like you needed to ask a health expert or someone who is an expert in the specialist in the field of COVID vaccines? So now is the time to ask those questions. And I encourage you to, in the chat box, in the comment box, to always ask those questions. No question is a crazy one or too far-fetched. You always, all your questions are valid, and we would like to hear them, and we'll give time for that at a later time here in our live discussion. So with that being said, let's go ahead and move on forward to our next presenter, who is going to talk about how to talk to people who are questioning about getting COVID-19 vaccine, by Lana from NDOH Health, who is the NDOH Health Educator and HCOC Case Management. So with that, I'll give it over to her.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Linnea Desiderio Jim. I'm a health educator with the Navajo Health Education Program out of the Gallup and Tohatchee service area. My clients are non-anesthesia, Tachini Nishlan, Tanazani Bashichin, Torokoja Dashache, Kia Ani Dashanale. So I do want to thank you all for allowing me to be here to speak about how you as a viewer can talk to somebody who may be hesitant or questioning whether they should get the COVID-19 vaccine. As previously stated by Deanna and Dr. Hammett, there are people who have that vaccine hesitancy and who do have that misinformation or who has been misguided against getting COVID-19 vaccine. And those are people that we want to address, because even though I was stated, getting the vaccine is an individual choice, but we as people who care for our loved ones, who care for our family members, who care for our friends and relatives, this is where we can start that question of helping them make a choice of getting vaccinated, because we care about them, their health, and who they can come in contact with when it comes to COVID-19, and helping all of us as a tribe and a nation stop the spread of the COVID-19 disease. And it starts by addressing it and talking to people, making them feel comfortable and not making them feel judged about the COVID-19 vaccine. So this, for me here today, I do want to help guide you in that conversation and help you to talk to someone who may be reluctant to getting the vaccine, or they may be questioning it. And that's how I want to address you all today. And hopefully that this gives you that introduction of how to talk to somebody that you care about and talking to them about getting the vaccine. So COVID-19 vaccines are new, and it is normal for people to question about them. The amount of information around COVID, as well as the misinformation and disinformation about COVID-19 vaccines, can be overwhelming to anyone. Being that it's a new virus, this is something that could be a barrier and a prevention to somebody's safety. So this does help us to start that conversation. And you can start by listening without judgment and start by identifying the root of why they're not getting vaccinated. What's the root of their concerns? And many people have different concerns when it comes to the COVID-19 vaccines. There's multiple reasons why people might not want to get it, or they may be hesitant to get the vaccine. But the main concerns that I've heard out in the community, doing what I do as a health educator, assisting at vaccine event, testing events, most of the concerns have been expressed that people are questioning and hesitant of the vaccine because of how quickly the vaccine was created. And in Deanna's presentation, she did explain that step process that vaccines have to go through before getting approval. So having that vaccine created so quickly, it brought up the question of people wondering, is the vaccine safe? And that could be reasons why people do not get the vaccine. And the way that you can address that issue is to start by giving the person the facts. So today I want to share with you 4 steps of how you can address someone who may be hesitant about getting the vaccine and how you can talk to them. And I want to guide you in those steps. So the first step, you can start by talking a bit about the history of the vaccines, giving them the background information of how vaccines in the past protected us and how in the future vaccines are going to continue to protect us and keep us safe from all these viruses out in the world that circulate or emerge that could really be life-threatening to us. So a little history about vaccines. Vaccines are a proven way to help us save lives. They also helped us eliminate terrible diseases throughout history that we've seen before, such as smallpox, polio, and measles. Today, there are over 100 different types of vaccines that are currently out there that help us prevent illnesses and diseases and infections. Now, these vaccines are a major reason we no longer have these widespread outbreaks and infections of these diseases. So those are giving them that history, like we've seen it before, you've been vaccinated before. When we're kids at certain ages, we get these vaccinations to prevent us from these past illnesses as to reasons why we no longer see it today. So that's just an understanding that the COVID-19 vaccine is no different. It's something that is going to protect us in the long run from having to deal with complications or the severity of the disease. So that's one way you can talk to someone and give them that background information about vaccines and how they have helped us come this far as not only the nation, but us as a tribe. We got here this far is because we have been protected through these things that have been available from the medical community. Second, you can address those misconceptions and disinformation that are circulating out in the community. Most people may have concerns of reasons of why they may be scared to get the COVID vaccine. And a lot of what people have stated is bringing up the issue of the side effects. I can't tell you how many times people come in to get vaccinated and ask, how bad will I get sick? How long will I be sick after this? And when people do ask that, they have that understanding that if they get the vaccine, they're going to be injected with the COVID-19 virus. And that's not true. The vaccine does give us some parts of the agent that helps our body recognize the virus so that when the virus does enter our body later, our body already recognizes that virus and knows what defense it needs to put up for you to make sure that you don't suffer from the severity of that disease or illness or sickness that you caught with that virus. So when we do talk about side effects, you could mention that the side effects are depending on the person. Not everybody gets severe side effects or feel different. Some people feel perfectly normal after getting their vaccine. Most of the side effects that are reported is just pain at the injection site. Some people have a headache or a fever. So those are ways that you can talk through. A person who may be hesitant about the vaccine is talking about the side effects and giving them the factual information. You can also bring up that the side effects are temporarily, and again, they don't mean that you have the disease, that the vaccine gave you the disease. It's just giving you that agent to help your immune system give it the best fight against the real vaccine if it were to enter your body. And if you do feel side effects or you feel that you may be sick, that's just an indication that your immune system is working. It's doing what it's supposed to do. So that's a misconception that people have, is that when they get the vaccine, they're going to get the virus, but that's not true. And that's something that you as a person can help guide the person you're talking to, give them the correct information. And as Dr. Hammond said, you can look up information on the Center of Disease Control, the World Health Organization. There's the Johns Hopkins Center of American Indian Health. We even have our Navajo Department of Health, as well as the Office of the President here on Navajo Nation. They're good about sharing stuff that are current and up to date for the COVID-19 disease and prevention information. So those are your credible resources that are out there that you can reach and help guide somebody into talking about getting the vaccine and helping them to feel less afraid and less reluctant or hesitant to get the vaccine. Now, third is something I use to help people understand the vaccine, is to help them find their own reason as to why they should get the vaccine. So many people have their own reasons as why they got vaccine or why they chose to get vaccinated. And being that I help out in the community at these vaccination events, a lot of people do express why they got the vaccine, how they were at first reluctant or hesitant to get the vaccine, but later they had their reason as to why they ended up getting the vaccine. So some of the reasons that I've heard out in the community that people, why they got vaccinated, was to protect their family, protect their children who are too young right now to get the vaccine. And then to help them feel less anxious about the COVID-19 disease. Also, for them to visit their parents, to visit their grandparents, to feel safe to be among their grandma and their grandpa and know that they're not going to get them sick. Also, for them to go back to normal activities before the COVID-19 pandemic. Some people got it so they can return back to work and provide for their family. And then most younger youth children did it so they can return back to school and participate in sports. Something that is really high here on the Navajo Nation is the athletes on our nation and how well and skilled our players are and athletes are. So those are reasons why other people got vaccinated. So when you're talking to someone who may be reluctant or who is hesitant about getting the vaccine, you can have that heart-to-heart with them and explain why you got vaccinated and share with them, like, I got vaccinated because I wanted to have that peace of mind that if I go visit my grandparents, I'm not going to get them sick. Because of me, they're not going to go to the hospital. And that gives me that sense of mind that because I'm vaccinated, I'm protecting them. Because I'm vaccinated, I can go visit them. Because I'm vaccinated, I can provide for them, keep them safe. So those are some reasons that people have that heart-to-heart with one another. And then the person who may be hesitant or reluctant may see your point of view and may understand and apply it to their personal lives. And that could also help nudge them into the direction of getting the COVID-19 vaccine, is because, again, it's an individual choice, but our vaccine, being vaccinated, just doesn't protect our individual self. It protects others around us that we come in contact with. So that's one point that you can also bring up and have that comfort of talking to your person, your loved one, that family member, and helping them to get vaccinated. And then lastly, step 4 is once you get them to understand, okay, that it's okay to get vaccinated. They made that decision. They need to get vaccinated. It doesn't stop there. Help them get to a vaccination site. During this time, if they do choose to get vaccinated, well, in your conversation, offer to help that family member, that loved one, and that friend. Help them to make a vaccination appointment, or help them find a location, a healthcare facility nearby where you know there's vaccination events, or you know of their vaccination schedules and where they can get vaccinated. Help them to get there. And if it goes to the point where you can offer your transportation to get them there, that would be something that you could do and step up for that family member, just so you can make sure that they're safe, that their family and their loved ones are also safe. You can also offer to babysit their children, babysit for them, watch over their kids, so that they can take the time to get themselves vaccinated. So overall, they protect all of their kids just within that few hours that you step up and have to offer them that that kindness of helping them out to get vaccinated. And just most importantly, bring up the idea that when we're all vaccinated, the more we can return back to normal. When we're all vaccinated, we can all feel safe. And it's not just for that individual. We're protecting that person's family, that person has friends, that person has grandparents, that person belongs to another community. So when you help a person and help guide them into talking about why they're not getting the vaccine, you're really helping more than just that one person. You're helping a whole community of people that that person comes in contact with. So I hope this does help you, guide you through talking to someone about getting the COVID-19 vaccine. I also want to mention that when talking to someone about getting the vaccine, it is one of the good main tactics is to bring up the benefits of the COVID-19 vaccine, talk about the positivity of the COVID-19 vaccine and what it can do for us. And that being, the COVID-19 does give us that protection from experiencing the severity of the illness. It protects us nearly 100%. It's not all the way 100. We can still get sick and we can still spread the virus, but we can limit our chances of being hospitalized and dying from COVID. So that's where that vaccine has that positivity in our life when we are fully vaccinated. Also, when we're all fully vaccinated, we help stop COVID-19 from spreading on the Navajo Nation, in the states, and nationwide and worldwide. We help be a part of that statistic to stop COVID, to eliminate it, just as we eliminated smallpox, just like we eliminated polio, just like we eliminated measles. So that's where you can help us in this fight against COVID, is by getting fully vaccinated. You protect the elders in the community, family members, and children who are too young to get vaccinated, especially if they're under the age of 12. That's where we step in when it comes to the COVID-19 vaccine and being fully vaccinated. You can also bring up how what we've seen so far statistically, we've seen a decrease in cases nationwide, statewide, and here on the Navajo, Hopi, and the San Juan Paiute nations. We've seen a decrease in cases, and that's because majority of our people are getting vaccinated, but there's still people out there who aren't vaccinated. So if you know of a loved one, a friend, a family member who may be reluctant or questioning the vaccine, this is how you can have that conversation with them and help them to feel more comfortable and feel safe about the COVID-19 vaccine. And then lastly, I just want to mention that if you, as a viewer yourself, are feeling reluctant, are feeling hesitant yourself about the vaccine, and that me talking is helping you develop that understanding that you should get vaccinated, I do encourage that you do your research, as like Dr. Hammett said. Don't just rely on the resources on the media. Try to research, ask questions, your doctor, your healthcare facility nearby is a good resource, an in-person resource that you can talk to help you to make an informed decision about getting vaccinated. So again, just in summary, the steps to help guide you through talking to someone about getting vaccinated is to talk about the history of the vaccine, address misconception about the vaccines, help that person understand why, what's their personal reason as to why they should get vaccinated. And then lastly, help them find a vaccination site near them that's convenient for them. But I do thank you. I hope you guys use that information and help talk to somebody who may be hesitant or reluctant to get the vaccine. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Leanna, for the information that you have provided us. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of people that has helped put their mind at ease and also has helped us all find a way to, has all helped and guided us on how we can address this issue within our communities. And it's important that we understand that we always get factual information from trusted sources, such as the individuals who came here today. So with that being said, I will go ahead and give it over this time to the host of this event. That way we can answer any questions if there are, and then we'll go ahead and move on over to the closing of this event.
Thank you, Ms. Navajo and Niagara. I appreciate your leadership during this time. It's all been good. That's been great information from Dr. Hammett and from, I'm sorry, I forgot the name. Lost my notes here. My apologies. Linnea Desiderio, Jim, I appreciate her words there, wisdom, and just based all on actual information. So, but at this time, we do have some questions, and time does permit us to ask these. So I'll start real quick. Some groups do not agree to vaccination for different reasons. In general, do you agree with these groups? I guess that's going out to our panel. And I'm not sure who wants to answer that, Dr. Hammett or Linnea.
Thank you, Vice President. This is Dr. Hammett, and I can start and welcome input from Dee or from Linnea on this as well. I think, that's one of the things that we have all tried to emphasize, I think, is that people do need to be respectful of one another's beliefs and be respectful of one another's perspectives on this. I think we want to encourage people as much as possible to understand the facts about vaccines, the risks about the disease, and be able to make an informed decision for themselves that they feel, best protects themselves and their community members.
All right, thank you for that. I kind of jumped around on my notes here, but can you break down the COVID-19 virus for the younger generations to understand real quick? I know it's probably a recap, but we have some young members that did join us here late as we're going through this town hall or this update. But real quick, just I guess a recap of that COVID-19 virus for the younger generations to understand.
Sure, I can start with that. This is Dr. Hammett, and I'm happy to have other people weigh in as well. But this is a coronavirus. We have different types of coronaviruses that have been circulating for many, centuries, and that there are coronaviruses that circulate on Navajo Nation prior to the pandemic that just cause, for the most part, symptoms similar to a common cold. Occasionally, they can lead to more severe illness like a pneumonia, but primarily, the coronaviruses that we had known prior to this SARS-CoV-2 strain were the cause of mild respiratory or lung and breathing problems. This new strain that was first identified back in December of 2019 was brand new, a novel strain. So nobody in the world had immunity to it at all because it hadn't ever circulated before. And that is what, created the conditions for this pandemic. No one had immunity to this, and it was something that caused significant disease and could be spread very easily. So it's a virus that, we talk a lot about, people hear a lot about the spike protein. So surrounding the virus, there are these spikes that stick out, which is, if you look at it under a microscope, looks like a sort of a crown or a corona. That's how the virus has got its name. But that virus is something that, like I said, is a novel virus that just emerged. And so that's why it's causing this global pandemic. Fortunately, we have tools now to combat it. We have vaccines, and we also have, treatments for people, monoclonal antibodies and other treatments that are being approved. One thing I do want to say, I know we've really focused on vaccines during this session, but what we've started to see recently is that people, there are treatments that are available for people who are getting infected, but people are waiting too long to come in to get tested. They feel like they've got a sore throat or a headache. They wait 4 or 5 days, they go get tested. And by the time they get their test results back, sometimes, we talk to them about coming in for that monoclonal antibody. And then it's too much time has passed and they're either no longer eligible for that treatment or they've already been hospitalized. So we really want people, we have tools to combat this. We have tools to test for it, but we need people to come in and get tested if they're feeling unwell.
All right, thank you for that, Dr. Hammett. Niagara, do you have a question for our audience or for our panel?
Yes, thank you, Vice President Leiser. So my question is that the coronavirus vaccines, there are 2 types, the Moderna and Pfizer. And for the youth, they often get confused as to which one they should get or which one they are given within the hospital systems and healthcare systems. So can you tell us the difference between the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccine and if they both have the same effect?
This is Dr. Hammett again, and I can take that one. So the 2 different vaccines that you mentioned, the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccines, are made very similar. They're both mRNA vaccines. Right now, the Pfizer vaccine is the one that's recommended for children. Moderna recommendations, and Pfizer is being considered by the FDA later this month for whether it can be approved for children who are 5 to 11 years of age, which is really exciting so that we can help to protect those younger children. But those 2 vaccines that you mentioned are both made very similarly. They both provide excellent protection for people. And one thing that there was a question I saw from the Facebook stream, there was a question about whether a person should still get their second shot if they missed it. And the answer to that is absolutely yes. Getting that second shot will provide you the full protection afforded by these vaccines. And so even if it's been, a couple of months or even longer, you can still go in and get that second shot and make sure that you have good levels of antibodies to be fully protected.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Here's probably one that's being asked right now by many. If a person received the Moderna vaccine, can they receive a Pfizer booster shot? Why or why not?
Thanks, Vice President, and I can go ahead and answer that one as well. It's recommended to receive the second dose as the same as the first dose. So that's because that's how how these vaccines were developed and how the vaccines were studied. When we say the vaccine is, 95% efficacious, it's when those 2 vaccines are given back, on the same regimen. And so we do know, even on Navajo Nation, sometimes, we've had a supply change, or somebody's gone to one facility for their first dose and to another facility for their second dose. If somebody does have a mismatch or a mismatched vaccine schedule, it's not recommended to repeat that second dose. If you got Moderna to start and then Pfizer for your second, or vice versa, you don't have to repeat those doses. But if you sort of have control over it and can do it, it's recommended to get the same doses for every vaccine in the series, or the same manufacturer for every vaccine in the series.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Hammett. And I think our time is dwindling. One more question from Ms. Navajo, and then we will close. Go ahead, Niagara.
All right, thank you, Vice President. So the next question that we have is, does the vaccine contain any graphene oxide? It was asked by one of our members of the Navajo Nation.
Thank you, Niagara. I can take that one. The vaccine does not contain any graphene oxide, and where this idea came from is from a professor, Dr. Jose Luis Sevillano, who put out some reports about him detecting graphene oxide in a vial of Pfizer. However, when the research was actually looked at, there was no way of confirming if it was a vial of containing any kind of COVID vaccine. And then there were just some other issues wrong with his methods in that study. And so people who study this and other researchers have since refuted or said that this is not right. And Pfizer itself has said that there's no graphene oxide in its vaccines. There's also an article which I can share on the Facebook feed so everyone has, but just talks a little bit more about graphene oxide, what it is, and why it's not being used in any vaccines right now, but maybe it could be used in the future. So as what we know right now, it's not in any vaccines, though it might be used in the future if they can better research the levels that are not toxic to humans. I don't know if anyone wants to add anything. Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dion. And you're right. These are just one of the things that we can do as good citizens, good people, leaders of our families, is to make sure we get the information, and where we get it from is very important. So at this time, I guess we'll make our closing comments. I'm myself, Vice President, filling in for our President Jonathan Nez, and also from Niagara Rockbridge for our Miss Navajo, our newly crowned Miss Navajo. She's doing a great job. We appreciate her leadership and the ability to just be about all of these issues right now. She just hit the ground running, so we appreciate her at this time. So in closing, I want to talk a little bit about the vaccines. So far in the United States, 399 million doses have been administered in the United States. 6.43 billion doses have been administered across 184 countries. Now, this is including the series of Pfizer and Moderna, and also the other one, I can't think of the other Johnson & Johnson vaccines that have been out there. And we want to be thankful to the Trump-Pence administration previously for Operation Warp Speed, which pushed this out. They fast-tracked this vaccine development to get to this point. And also to the Biden and Harris administration for ramping up the delivery out to the public. And the Navajo Nation, we kind of lead the way. Over 75% of our citizens have been fully vaccinated. So, we're really doing a great to this. We're needing to take this over. The next obstacle, I guess, is those remaining that won't get the vaccine for, again, whatever reason. So I do want to put this out there for you to that are on the fence, that are considering maybe not, right? Really show yourself approved, study, take in all this research that's out there, good town hall subjects, much like this one here, is very prudent for us to listen to and get the facts again. I also want to leave this note out there as well. Even in scripture, it says that whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there's any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. And, what you've learned and received and heard and seen in me, practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you. So that's some scripture taken from Philippians 4:8-9 there. But just like I've always said in any of our town hall discussions, President and I, we are praying for you all across our nation here. All of you, we're praying for you as leaders, and we're working like it depends on us, but we're praying like it depends on our Creator, and God, as it does, to bring about healing, to bring about comfort and peace across our nation here. You are resilient. We are resilient. We've learned this from our ancestors. We are still here, and we'll continue to be here. And we just want many more, all of you, to be safe and sound during this. And we can also do our part, right? We can boost our immune systems by taking in more vitamin D, by living a stressless life, laugh more, love often. We do know we can create this better atmosphere for our families. Also prioritize exercise in our life. Your body loves it, right? Yeah, those endorphins kick in, you get addicted to those. Let that be the vice that you get addicted to, is the endorphins here as you work out, as you run, as you walk, as you enjoy the great outdoors. We eat to fuel everybody's helpful or harmful. And we just want to thank you all for, again, just wanting to incorporate a better lifestyle for you and your loved ones here. I also want to thank, again, Dr. Hammett. Thank you, from Johns Hopkins University here, and the great work that she's doing there. Diana Vigil, thank you for what you're doing out there. Linnea Desidero, Jim, thank you for everything that you've done. And of course, Niagara Rock Ridge. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to our own Miss Navajo for her closing remarks. May God bless you.
Vice President Myron Lizer, the Kodoni Hesitancy, do Baket and Nixon. A cock, a chin, ya call, benched a higi, ya, a shonde, not so con, shik zani, not thini. Call the chin, the ze, the gedaskeo. A con the nebeke of a car, go tata do car, a shonde. In the da ya di. Nikitla Kalawash Beta Dakis in the Daki hand sanitizer a thought or Yahigi Chodas a thought in the Daeya di con social distancing a thought or Diego a thought in the Daeya con the Nihinat Ani dan Linigi Ashon de con bizarre and Linigi Benat and Linigi Ashon de Isos Dobik Ashon de cut out Yahadi the cousin Sagi Nahast eight Ada was Yahigi Ashi Benachin be it all Yahaj Dadika. A cut out the Okonsagon hitch has seat on left. These Sadigi Ahano Shene Hala Yaha a yonin schno a hinchne Shama Shaja Shamasana Shache Shanala Shadeja Shadesile Shana Shak Shazani Nothini Di ya a consago nihich a hasti dole in the ya con a tisako belagana etrigo shinkodonihich hadestze. It is such an honor to be here amongst our health experts and specialists in the fields of COVID-19 vaccines and within their own fields of practice. It is very important that we continue to stay vigilant and that the COVID-19 virus is still out here and is still impacting our families and our communities and our nation. It is important to remember to always have factual information, to have credible information wherever it is that we go. And just as our Vice President of the Navajo Nation stated, Myron Lizer, it is important to always love one another, to respect one another, to cherish one another. It is within our own teachings that this is here within us as Diné people. So I encourage you to do so, to respect the leaders and the guidance of our health experts, as they are the ones who have studied this virus. And we, by the advice of these individuals, will lead us out of this coronavirus pandemic. But right now, we are still facing this pandemic and the virus that is impacting our lives. So I encourage you to please continue to wear your mask, abide by the public health orders if you live on the nation and even off of the nation, no matter who you are and where you come from. This coronavirus is not something that we can avoid, and is something that we may have to live with for a period of time until we can get it under wraps. And doing that is getting our coronavirus vaccines and getting vaccinated against this virus. That is our strength, and that is our weapon against this monster that is plaguing our people. Always remember to social distance 6 feet, and also to wash your hands with soap and water, and to utilize hand sanitizer. This is something that I am promoting from my end as Miss Navajo Nation, but not only Miss Navajo Nation, but as a member of the Navajo Nation, somebody who is just like you. My little brothers, my little sisters who are out there watching, I am just like you. I once had questions maybe just like you as well. And that's why I brought to you this forum and this live discussion today, so that you can have questions that maybe you have answered. And I hope that I have provided you, and we all have provided you with the information needed to get this done. And hopefully we have answered your questions. And I encourage you to get vaccinated. I encourage you to protect your home, your communities, and our nation. And most importantly, all of us here. And as we continue to fight this COVID-19 pandemic. And again, I'd just like to say thank you so much to all of the individuals who helped participate in this live discussion today. Our Vice President Myron Leiser, Dr. Laura Hammett, Lene, and then also Deanna Vigil, and Eli, Leslie, Janine, and Crystal and Curly, everyone who is behind the scenes who we have not seen today, but who have also